It's been months of lead up, maybe years of work, but it's happened. Your tabletop role-playing game crowdfunding was successful. Now what? Today, we're reassembling our panel of experienced TTRPG publishers and crowdfunding aficionados to discuss now what? Printing, fulfillment, and communications. This is a quick how-to guide with a panel of experts talking about what you do once you're funded. This panel is brought to you by Crowdfunder. Crowdfunder is the creator-friendly crowdfunding platform. The platform is free to use, listens to its creators, invests in their success, and cares about social good and impact. Crowdfunder's Tabletop Non-Stop 2024, a special spotlight on TTRPG projects, starts in February. To learn more about Crowdfunder, please visit www.crowdfunder.com. Hello, everyone. I'm James Kerr from Radio James Games, and I'm here to introduce our panelists. Our first panelist is Alan Barr, award-winning lead designer and founder of Gallant Knight Games, makers of Tiny D6. Alan has already written for Osprey Publishing, Steamforged Games, Octopath Publishing, and more. Good afternoon, Alan.
Hey, happy to be here.
Next, we have Dan Bronson-Lowe, self-proclaimed dad creator from Almost Bedtime Theater, which has the aim of introducing families of all kinds to TTRPGs and creating content appropriate for players of all ages. Hello, Dan.
Hello, hello.
And our final panelist is Steph Campbell. Steph runs ttrpgkids.com and values incorporating science and other educational elements into their games. Hello, Steph.
Hello.
So we're back with our panel of experts, and it's time to discuss what happens after you've wrapped up your crowdfunding campaign. What are the next steps to take? First, let's go back in time from before your campaign wrapped to all the things you should have already worked out, and there are always a few. I want to talk first about sizes and formats, because we're living in an age when the digital property is becoming as important as the print property. And there's going to be a point at which the digital property eclipses the print one, but we still get to have, the print will continue on as a luxury product for more than our lifetimes. We still get to enjoy that. But where the focus is being put is still on the print product, and it happens to have a PDF, which if you're lucky gets hyperlinks and bookmarks and all the rest of it. Well, if you're more than lucky, you should be doing that at this point. But the point is, the primary design focus and attention is on the print product. Even still, I don't know if that's going to be the case in 5 years, but it is right now. So let's talk about format. Steph, when you were designing your book, what is it? Is it a gigantic, like letter-sized, like Dungeons and Dragons 8.5 by 11 tome of outrageous thickness that becomes a murder object that you can bludgeon people with? Was it a tiny little pocketbook? Was it a digest size 5.5, 8.5, or 6 by 9? What did you do?
It was a 24-page digest-sized zine. So I kept it that size because through my site, I had a lot of data showing what people were looking at more. I feature a lot of other creators on the site. So I was looking at what pages people most frequently visited, what they were clicking on, what they wanted, and shorter form tabletop RPGs that were kind of in that small booklet size were really popular. And that's, I think, what a lot of people that are playing tabletop RPGs with kids, just like my target audience, wanted, because it's really hard to explain a big giant tome to a small child and like condense that down. So I made sure that it was a smaller size in order to fit my audience.
Now, and putting my publisher's hat on, small size and zines are great for markup, right? You get a much better margin on smaller material. If your book is is 200 pages or 300 pages, people expect it to be the same price. But when you're talking about a 24-page zine, you can set a reasonable price on it considering cost of production. Is there a reason why you did 24 pages and not 32 plus 4 cover? Because that's usually a form, right? That's usually one form, a sheet that gets folded down. So 24 pages is usually more expensive than doing 32 plus 4.
So when I did the math for kind of calculating it out with the printer that I had, that ended up being the most cost-effective way to do it. It was also where the book naturally went to.
Okay.
And I didn't want to have like a bunch of filler pages. So
No, fair
I
enough.
kept it that size in order to make it feel a little bit more complete. And it just happened to be where the math worked out.
Did you do full color interior or black and white?
Full color interior because I had full color art.
Okay. And where did you get it printed?
Mix them.
Okay. So they're the largest digital press in the United States. So
Yep.
yeah. Okay.
Safe bet
So
for my first one.
yeah. And if they're doing they don't always print in 24 forms or in 32 forms. So you can do it cheaper that way. Yeah, they're pretty universally used. I always encourage people to use their local press, but in that's more common in some areas than in others. And they have Mixam has a pretty handy cost calculator on their website too, which can help things. All right, so okay, we got your format, we got your page count, we got your black and white. The problem with doing something on a scale like Mixam is you're not going to save money by doing black and white in one color, right? Like you can't do black and white just see, like you would, or any other trick like that. It's either full color or it's black and white. Like those are your options. That's how it goes. Daniel, how about you? What format, interior, page count? What does it look like?
I had a trio of trifold brochures, letter size. I also used Mixam because I'd heard a lot of good things and I wanted to make sure that part worked. Then I had a set of bookmarks that I had printed as a brochure and then did all the cutting myself. Next time I will definitely find yet another source of printing to get those bookmarks done the way I want. And then I had it's a library card for the game. So it's a prop that goes with the game. It's basically a super thick business card that I printed through Canva, and it came out gorgeous. So that worked really well. And then lastly, I had my box. So that was through yet another source. It was custom boxes.
Hand assembled all of the stuff, right?
And then yes, I did the final cuts and hand assembled everything.
And now for the trifold brochure, I assume you went with a heavier stock.
Yes. Let's see. I think it was 120-pound cover. So it was thick enough that I tried a local printer, and the options they were able to give me, it wasn't going to be that thick and it was going to come out shiny, and I really wanted a matte finish on it.
Yeah. Now, quantity is a big issue in our industry, right? Like most traditional printers start at 1,000 copies. They say go away if you're not going to print 1,000 copies. Most indie tabletop role-playing games only sell 500 copies in their lifetime. So most of them are like the average is below industry standard, and cost of production raises drastically when you're talking about small amounts. So how many of them did you print, Daniel?
I was aiming for 250. That was where I was able to. I felt I could get the price right for the crowdfunder exercise. And if it had gone really well, then I would have bumped it to 500. But I think I ended up with about 270 copies all told by the time all was done.
That's great. And the overflow copies, you've got them up for sale somewhere else as well?
I do. Yeah. Just recently got them set up with Indie Press Revolution.
Oh, that's great. They're great. They're great people.
Oh, yeah. It's been awesome.
Okay. Because the issue is some people say you should only worry about the crowdfunder and getting those quantities. Some people say that should only be a third of the quantities you order, so that you should have enough stock to be able to fund you through the next, 3 years of printing. I can't imagine the risk of only printing what you do for a crowdfunder myself. Like because my last book is also through Indie Press Revolution, and so they got all the extra copies, or the overflow copies that resulted from the digital print run, because I also did a digital print run, not through Mixam because I'm in Canada, so I did something local to me, but it was a digital print. For those people who don't understand, plate printing, like a CMYK offset press, is the traditional method of printing. It's literally just colored like metal plates that get pressed down. It produces something that is gorgeous. But if you're not talking about 1,000 or 2,000 copies, then don't bother. Like at least, because the cost will be tremendously prohibitive. What most of the industry has gone to is a digital print run, because the quality of digital presses have gone up substantially over the past 10, 20 years. Is it just a souped up version of the printer that you have under your desk? Well, kind of, but it's huge. It's like the size of a 1960s computer or something. But the quality you can get is quite good, and is a lot better than a print on demand quality. Print on demand is wonderful for many reasons, but it's not going to give you a good ink quality. Dan, you did, obviously the whole thing was for full color, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So the quality of the ink was very important to that product. Steph, how many copies are we talking with you?
So I did 150 to start,
Okay.
based on the crowdfunding campaign. I actually did not sell that many on the crowdfunding campaign. I had a lot of people donate to support my website, but not a lot of
there you
physical
go.
copies sold. I just did a second print because it's been selling out at conventions and on Indie Press Revolution. So in total, there's about 250 copies that have been made so far, and I am now looking at doing a third print at about 1,000 or so. So
That's wonderful. Well, you rarely get a long tail that ramps up. So you
yeah,
must be doing
I was
something
very
right.
surprised.
Yeah. I mean, for myself, I sold maybe 300 through print on demand, and did a digital press run of 500 that I'm now out of, and I need to hit the press again. Alan, you have many experiences to choose from, because I knew you before this call, so it's talk to me about the landscape. You know what we're talking about. Give it to me. Lay it all out.
That's a big ask. Let me see here. So we've done everything from digital zines, trifolds, up through offset 10,000 book print runs. I'm a big proponent of alternative methods like digital print, print on demand, things like that. I think even if you are doing an offset print run, you are risking an accessibility issue at the minimum by not having digital print offerings on various sites and places. But the big drawback of a lot of digital print sites is it does limit your retail options to a degree. A lot of retailers won't accept, especially larger ones, won't accept digital print retail options. And so I think when you are picking your printer and the format and stuff, is also a good consideration for what's down the road, right? Like, what is my plan for the extra copies? Am I just going to sell them out of my garage? Am I going to try to get hooked up with the distributor or retailer? Am I just going to take them to cons and, sell them out of the back of my car like it's 1974, right? So there's a lot of options there, and I think some of that consideration plays into format and printing too.
I would like to make a hard and fast advice to anybody who's new to the space, which is not typically advisable, which I will tell you: keep it under 200 pages and make your interior black and white. Because one of the most obvious mistakes that I find people entering the space make is they have a cost of production that is 70% of their MSRP. And then there's no way that they'll ever make money. Like, even if they sold out tomorrow, they'll never make a cent. And you know what? You deserve to have a dinner. You deserve to, like, and we have Alan here. You deserve to be able to make a living. But if your MSRP is too low, or it can't be that high because nobody's going to pay, an arm and a leg for this thing, then you can really foul up this thing that you spent years on. So I always suggest to people, I know everybody wants a gorgeous magazine like interior, but start thinking simple, start with black and white, make sure you really nail that cover, and keep it small, because the tendency among tabletop role-playing game developers and writers is to keep adding words and keep adding words and keep adding words and keep adding words. And unless you have somebody who you trust with a hatchet behind you who is going to take care of all those words, your cost of production can balloon outrageously. So that's my soapbox about format and book size. I guess actually I have more soapboxes. I don't know, like, I'm really glad that the digest format of 6x9 has taken off in the industry, because it's a lot easier to ship. And I find that it for design, you don't have as much page real estate. You can't fool around with it as much as 8.5 by 11, but I like it because you can actually carry the books in your bag and take them to places. But there's never been more interesting sizes and formats available than there are now. It's never been easier. So let's embrace that. Because even like 10 years ago, when I was talking to Studio 2, they were like, oh, I don't know, digest size. I don't know. Like, nobody's going to buy that. If it's not 8.5 by 11, nobody's going to buy it. Completely changed in 10 years. So thank God. Printing format. So we talked, Steph, you went with Mixam. Dan, you went with a number of different places, but Mixam was also one of them. That's certainly the conventional answer. Alan, you've been with many different printers. I guess the question is, how do you choose what's right for you and what's right for your project? Where should somebody start? Alan, I'm actually going to pick on you because I know you've got notes on this.
My rule of thumb if you were a first-time publisher, this is your first project, you should work with a printer who has an online cost calculator so you can make an accurate budget at the start. And you can see changes on the fly. But that being said, don't just default to the first one. So not to pick on Mixam, but I don't use them anymore because I have found them to be significantly more expensive than similar priced options for equivalent or better quality.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, I would have said that about Mixam, but the fact is they're very accessible, right? People can
their tool is
them.
great.
Yeah.
Like I've used them for hundreds of books, probably thousands of printed copies, but there are other options that are just as easy to find if you're willing to do a little legwork. And yeah, some of those are difficult. You know, not everybody has the time or energy to want to interface with international printers. And it can be difficult because there can be a lot lost in translation. So, you know, I think, you know, having access to easy budgeting on the fly often outweighs the cost when you're doing your first project, because you can make sure you don't overrun or mess something up.
I find that a lot of tabletop role-playing game publishing is like a circus tent. You know, you're trying to get up one pillar and you're trying to get up the other pillar, and the tent has somehow got to come up, and everything kind of has to happen at once. Can you talk a little bit about at what point, Alan, you figure out what your MSRP should be?
I figured out before the. I apologize. Oh, I came out of nowhere. I try to figure it out.
Talking about MSRPs just makes everybody go into convolutions, right?
I want to talk about it. I look at my print cost and then I try to sell it for 4 times that.
4 times.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if I can print a black and white softcover digest for $4, I would try to sell it for 20.
And are you talking about cost of manufacturing or manufacturing and mailing?
Just cost of manufacture. I don't.
Oh, okay.
Like,
so
my goal is to have the Kickstarter and the crowdfunding pay for the cost of everything else, and it's about the excess going into retail because that allows me to make the next project. Right.
Okay. So at what point do you factor in yourself and the budget, like what it costs to make it? We don't.
The honest answer is every project I release does not account for paying me, because I worked 2 jobs for a long time until our passive, like just web store sort of sales were enough that they could pay my monthly cost. So I don't get paid by the projects we release. What I get paid by is, our passive sales.
I know that's common, and I'm in the same boat. But is it wise? Are we making a strong and healthy industry with this practice? I wonder.
Oh,
I
the
mean,
answer is no.
Yeah, well, I've across the board, if you talk to publishers, they'll tell you that the markup, the expectation of how much you pay for a tabletop role-playing game book is not high enough.
Right.
And even I've had distributors say to me directly, like, you guys are not charging enough for these books.
Right.
And I wonder, like, we've just gone through an ink crisis, we've gone through a paper crisis, we've gone through a shipping crisis. And even Wizards of the Coast took the opportunity to jack up the prices on their D&D books. I wonder if we're all due for a little bit of markup, because we don't tend to factor ourselves into these projects, which in some ways that's fine. If you're in the industry because it's a labor of love, this is your hobby, you just want to do this thing, you just want to hold this book in your hand, that's super cool. And it can be super cool for you. But as an industry, I think it needs people working in it in order to survive.
Can I get on my soapbox for a minute?
Please,
this is my
please.
soapbox.
Yeah.
Sweet. Awesome. So this has been my soapbox since I started. So for context, Gallant Knight, to our writers, we pay a minimum of 12 cents a word now, which is well above the industry average. And we've been doing that since we started. So we turned this sustainable. And the reason this sucks to hear and it sucks to say, but the primary reason game creators end up running these GoFundMes for insurance or health or etc. is that the consumers don't place value for the most part on the people producing the games they are making. And that in turn means they aren't willing to pay a living wage for the games they are making. If you look at the cost of a game, there is this perception of, oh, $60 for an RPG, that's a lot, right? It's only black and white art, it's only digest size, it's only 200 pages. Yeah, but if you have 5 friends come over and you guys play that for, a year, 3, that you're paying cents on the hour, like maybe a full cent on the hour at a certain point. And so there's this pushing. I was not prepared to get on the soapbox, or else I would have my whole little screed ready.
We shoved you right up there. It's
yeah. Okay. It's hard, and there's no easy answer, because if you want to make a living in the industry right now, the state we are in is you either have to have a second job or you are going to be working really hard. You're going to work 80 hours a week to live like you work 40. And that is unfortunate.
Let's loop this back to crowdfunding. So crowdfunding offers a tremendous opportunity for small publishers, because there's a lot of work that has to happen before something goes to crowdfunding. But the fact is you get the money first. Like,
yeah,
I know we just talked about how in all of our cases we got the editorial done beforehand. I didn't have all the art done before my last crowdfunder, for instance, because I needed the money to pay for the art.
Right. And when I started, I certainly wasn't doing it with all the art beforehand either.
But getting a big sum of money, knowing that those books are now paid for, you just had to put them out. Well, that is a big relief.
And the big benefit is, so let's say I sell 1,000 copies on my Kickstarter, and so I'm like, I'm going to print 2,000 because I want to put 1,000 into retail, right? If it's all paid for, I can sell that 1,000 at whatever I want now, because it's covered. It's all kind of gravy, right? And that allows me to build a healthy ecosystem, because I don't have to try to move the product immediately. In a sense, the core product's been moved. Everything is covered. Any money coming in is now going back into the business, is going back into me, is going back into the next project. And I have a lot more latitude to set pricing at a healthy level, knowing I'm sort of covered, rather than pricing something to move and get attention and get free marketing.
Well, 2 things from that. One is that only works if you've figured out your MSRP properly with your cost of production, which can sometimes be scary especially if you're a new publisher, to be like, oh God, what does this mean? Like, and then you do the math and you're like, I can't charge $90 for my book, right? That only works if you do the math, which is not scary. Like, all the numbers are out there. I'm sure you can just quickly Google it. It's fine. It's fine. It'll be fine. And that also only works if you've baked in cost for the books going out. Okay, so sorry guys, I don't mean to ignore you, Dan and Steph, but I'm interested in this. Have you had a lot of pushback changing prices after a crowdfunder is done? Because that's one thing that I've seen happen, is you had one price for the crowdfunding and another price for retail, and then people have said,
Well, they
how
should
do you
have
deal
backed
with
the
it?
Kickstarter. Yeah,
They should have backed the Kickstarter.
like, sorry.
Well, I mean,
but
that's
your
what,
options are: you save $3 or I starve and die in the street. And I'm choosing to get that $3 off you if you want my game. So,
well, I mean, bringing this back to what I think is very positive about crowdfunding, it gets to be an event,
Yeah.
right? Like, even if your crowdfunder like barely breaks even, it's an event. You just created this hype machine, this glorious, like, come and see what I'm doing circus about your product, which is going to do nothing but help your presence. Because trying to get out there, trying to get it's kind of like its own advertising unto itself. You know, it's the glorious hype train, and I think it's worth doing even if you don't make anything out of it,
well,
just because it builds on itself.
and I think Daniel and Steph will see this, in later projects. Once you have one project under your belt, it is a lot easier to get more and more traction, right? You're sort of trying to lay that first brick in the foundation so you can build the rest of the building. Because once you go, look, I made a brick, I put it in the right spot, everything came out okay, I can build a house. People are going to go, oh, hey, there's, so far they're batting 100%.
And also, what's really cool about tabletop role-playing games is you'll have somebody come to you 7 years after you publish something, when you think it's been entirely forgotten, and tell you how cool it is. Because the long tail on it is especially good. It's better than fiction in terms of people discovering things late in the game and going, wow, that's so cool. And it's because they found it on some dumb Reddit forum. Like, that's what's wonderful about this. So you get a few of them under your belt, and you've got momentum. It gets easier and easier as you go, if you want to keep going.
And you get better at these parts of it, the pricing, right? I'm sure, Daniel, as he said, he's learned, I'm not going to do all these different components of different printers and self-assemble, right? Steph, having, done one project, I'm sure could have a much better grasp on how much it's going to cost and price MSRP, concurrently.
All right. Well, we'll talk about getting better at things as we go along. Let's talk about turnaround. I've known some Kickstarters that were fulfilled within 4 months. I've seen some Kickstarters that I'm still waiting on. It's been several years now. And I've even known successful Kickstarters that maybe took 4 or 5 years, because that's just how long things take sometimes. How long did your guys' projects take? And then we'll use that as a jumping off point for how long should they take. Dan, how long did yours take to fulfill?
It was fulfilled within a couple of months. And
because
that was
you're the responsible one in class, is what I
and the majority of that was the box. Getting the box. All the other printed stuff, I'd say all that other content I had within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, because it was all, it was prepped. It was sitting there ready to push the button, and that turnaround was quick.
Great. Steph, how about you?
Mine was a few months also. Because it was inspired by the Great British Baking Show, I wanted to make sure that it timed for when the season was out, and that it also came out before Thanksgiving holidays. So that way it kind of like fit in a nice little kind of slot for when people would want to play it.
Clever.
I had, because it was just a zine, it was pretty easy for me to meet that timing. In terms of how long it should take, I think being upfront about it is what's really important, because maybe it does take a year, but as long as you're communicating that, where the project is at right now, you'll have it a year from now, and then giving updates if there's delays. Like, that communication, I think, is really important in terms of how long it should take. So with mine, I gave a monthly update up until it was fulfilled. So that way I could say, we're on track, we're on track. If there was ever going to be any kind of delay, I had the opportunity to say that. And then once it was fulfilled, I was like, okay, we're in the clear. Thank you, everybody. I will see you at the next one. So, yeah.
My last Kickstarter took me about a year to fulfill, but it was largely because I lost my artist halfway through, because he got hired by Games Workshop. So I couldn't very well be bitter towards him. Like, goodbye, so long, have fun. Like, you're much bigger than me. And then I had to scramble and come up with 3 or 4 more artists to fill the art orders, because there were about 60 art orders in the book, and it turned out to be 336 pages. So it was a big boy, and in digest size, and 5.5 by 8.5. So it took longer than I thought, and then I shot myself in the foot with a stretch goal, which was, I thought it would be super easy to give a quick 50-page version of the game for solo rules. I didn't know how I was going to do that when I did the Kickstarter. And as soon as I fulfilled the core book, I quickly realized that it wasn't going to work. And that solo booklet turned into a 124-page full book on its own, which took me another 6 months to fulfill. So it's, I mean, maybe 8 months. Yeah, no, like we're up to, I will have fulfilled the whole thing in maybe another 2 months. And it was like March of last year. Yeah. Alan, I assume you've had some that have dragged on, and I assume you've had some that have come out right out of the gate.
I have done as fast as the day it closed, we delivered.
Holy cow.
And I have done we have, our longest one is about a year late. Now we super funded and like unlock like a whole second book. It had to be done in tandem. And so when we were unlocking the stretch goals, we were communicating, hey, this, just doing this goal is going to delay the book. Be prepared. Right. Our goal was estimated on the minimum funding level. So now, we can't make more of ourselves. So now it's just going to take longer. But yeah, so I mean, and part of that is just preparation. The more you have done in advance, the faster things turn around. The more you have to do after the campaign, the longer it's going to take, right?
There's always surprises, right?
Yeah, like a pandemic.
Okay, and briefly, let's do a little bit of a lightning round. So we've got some content to cover. We don't have a lot of time left, so let's be punchy. So Dan, talk to me about the struggles of packaging and shipping. Like, how did you navigate that territory? You had things coming in from all over the place. You had to pay separate shipping on all of it. You had to assemble them into a box, and then you had to ship them all out.
Yes.
And they're probably irregular and didn't fit conveniently in, shipping boxes.
Well, I actually had, as long as people were ordering one at a time, I found an envelope that was perfect size. There was a lot of back and forth originally with the post office. Yeah. Because I was just shy of being able to, it couldn't be media mail, but there was a shift from its letter or its box by like a 1/4 inch difference. And so there was a lot of preemptive work that went into establishing what is this actually going to cost to ship, because it made a big difference just right on the line there. I think that was the biggie for me. But then ultimately stuff was coming in, gathering it up. It was taking a big chunk of the bedroom. Then I got my kiddo to help out, and we processed and cut and chunked and assembled. And she had a grand time being my pick specialist, packaging things together. And then finding whatever double thickness cardboard box I could track down in order to ship out the large amounts so that they'd be protected.
You think you could have done anything to try and make sure that you were falling on the right side of the mailing issue?
For me, it was the addition of the box that suddenly made it more rigid. And so I was going to try, it's like, well, maybe if I didn't assemble it, it was all kept flat, but it still made it too rigid to count. I went back to the post office 3 times. There was a different person at the desk each time, and I got 3 different answers on what the price would be. So I finally decided, okay, I'm going to assume it's the larger price, and sure enough, that's what they took it for.
I'm sure they loved you.
Yeah.
Okay, so lightning round. Alan, have you ever had to deal with supporters wanting to back out or receive a refund? And how did you handle that?
Refund them.
You just don't even bother. Just, here's your money. Go away.
unless there's a really compelling reason not to, I'm kind of the mind that they have their reasons and that's their business, and so I do it.
Yeah, I've heard from more than one publisher that it is never worth hashing it out or discussing or anything.
No.
Just give the money, go. Just forget about it.
Yeah,
The money's not yours.
chances
It's
are
gone.
you can find a way to make that 10, 20, 30 bucks back, right? Like,
yeah. And it's
just
all
easier
right.
to, you're not going to win a fight, and then they're going to dispute with your credit card and you're going to lose that, and just not worth it.
Yeah. Steph, did you have any pledges bounce or like
I
bad
did.
credit or yeah?
I had a couple. One of them was actually a really big one, and it got flagged, and that reward tier filled up before they could figure it out. And they messaged me afterwards, and I was like, "Oh no, what do I do?" So that can happen sometimes. So, yeah.
Well, what do you do about it? What do you do?
Well, so I was lucky. It got caught in the system. So like when they tried to charge to it, it was, I think, Stripe caught it. And so it didn't end up affecting the campaign itself, but that backer did miss out on the limited spots that were in that tier before they could figure out the issue with their credit card, which was really disappointing because it was a limited spot kind of section on there. So, yeah.
Steph, did you charge for shipping up front?
Yes.
And you liked that? You would do that again?
For sure. Especially if you're doing any international shipping. That is one thing that I ran into big time. There was, I was offering international shipping at a higher rate, but it was not high enough to cover a couple of countries. So there was one order that went to Malta that I was not expecting, and the shipping to there was very expensive compared to everywhere else, even just for the small booklet. So for kind of future campaigns, I'm going to be looking at having a list of countries that I can ship to instead of leaving it totally wide open.
That is what most of us are doing now, I think.
Yeah.
Now I cheated. I mean, I don't know if you can call it cheating. I didn't want to have to mail out books because I'm in Canada, so anything that I do is going to be international shipping, and the shipping from Canada is insane, and never trust Canada Post, period. So I did it through a print on demand. It fulfilled through drive-through RPG, and I just gave out the codes, and people could do it at cost. I like it because it means that people get to see how much they pay for things. Like this is how much of the book costs, and that is how much you got in the Kickstarter, and it is fun, and you get a fun little library on drive-through RPG. Not to toot them up too much, because I'm also on itch.io, and et cetera, et cetera, and I'm also doing digital distribution. But I found that it worked for me in terms of what tier I'm at in publishing, which is not very high. Alan, I'm sure you have comments on all this.
I was going to say, especially if you're new, the drive-through RPG print on demand fulfillment is probably the easiest sort of fulfillment to manage. They're laying out for them can be a bit of a pain if you haven't done it before. So try to have somebody you can use as a reference, like getting the covers right. If you haven't done layout a lot, they can have some very particular bleeds and things like that other places don't have.
Really? Because it's only a 1/4 inch bleed, and they only want a 240% ink distribution, which is pretty low. But like, is it really different than any other printers? Like any printer you go to is going to want a 1/4 inch bleed. And
I'm not referring to just the bleed, but the requirements for drive-through RPG and how finicky Lightning Source can be in rejecting or accepting books it's definitely a thing. If you were to Google it, you would see lists of complaints from people about it, things like that.
My suspicion, though, and maybe I'm just being a snob because I'm coming from a traditional publishing background. Like I publish magazines, and I work with printers doing plate pressing, and I never saw anything in Lightning Source or drive-through RPG's requirements that I thought was more stringent. And I wonder if a lot of those complaints are coming from people who that's their experience printing, was trying to overcome the knowledge base of how to do it in the first place.
Which is why I'm saying, if you're doing this for the first time and you're doing it yourself, have an experienced hand to be a resource, because if it is your first experience with layout, it is more difficult than probably the average offset printer or a zine printer or something like that.
Yeah. Now, not to drive through RPG's horn too much, they do have tutorials and they have templates and they have et cetera, to try and smooth the process. But like,
And
I
their
think it's
publisher team is great at helping you sort it out
Yeah.
if you do have issues.
And like, I think it's really important to point out that if you're on this journey of doing publishing for tabletop role-playing games, you are assuming a lot of hats. You are deciding to be a writer, you're deciding to be a publisher, you're deciding to be a writer, you're deciding to be a circulation manager, you're deciding to be a layout artist, you're deciding to be, and all of these things are professions, not just little jobs. They're whole professions that you decided that you're going to do all at once. And I think it's important to be kind to yourself that a lot of these things are going to involve a huge learning curve that might take you years and years and years. And I agree with you, Alan, completely that it's great to have somebody watch over your shoulder. We're over time a little bit, so I'm not going to keep going on, but I will give a shameless plug for the Indie Game Developer Network, which is a network of indie publishers that basically just get together to say, hey, how much should my paper weigh? Hey, they just gave me this flag. They said it was overprinting. What's overprinting? Oh God, and so you can talk to each other and figure out what's going on. So we're talking today about your crowdfunder has funded, your crowdfunding project has funded. What's next? We spent quite a bit of that talking about what you need to make sure to have set up before you say what's next, because a lot of that can be working backwards. We talked about shipping, we talked about fulfillment, we talked about printing, and we talked about the long tail of passive income that can come from continued publishing. Do we have any final words of wisdom to maybe wisdom with a small w, but any final words of wisdom to put out to our audience? Daniel, do you have anything that you want to throw out there?
I just want to say that it was possible for me to find my way through thanks to many, many folks who were just so willing to share their experiences. I mean, you mentioned that network, but there's Discord groups. There's so many people out there who've walked this path already, and try to find some of them if you're looking at going through for your first time, because they can tell you about so many pitfalls that you don't have to find on your own. It's what made it truly possible for me.
Steph, do you have any parting words of wisdom?
A little bit in that same vein. Much of what I learned was actually looking at other people's campaigns. And what's really important with that is not just looking at other campaigns and other fulfillment plans and whatnot that were successful, but look at ones that did not fund and see what the difference is. So that way you can kind of pick up on the patterns for what to do and also what not to do. That would be kind of my big piece of advice, is look at how the campaign was set up and then check the updates log, see what was going on, see the comments that are left by people. So that way you can get a full picture of how to run it based on other people's experience as well.
Alan?
Second a lot of what was just said here. I don't know a single creator in this space that isn't willing to take some time and provide some advice if you talk to them. So if you have a game you really love the vibe of, you love the look of, or whatever, find out who made it if you don't know, and I bet they talk to you about it. And I bet they could happily would spend an hour or so just going over some of the stuff. I know I do it all the time. I'm happy to. I think it's fun. I love watching people be successful, make cool games that I get to purchase. And so I would like to do more of that. So just reach out. Don't be shy.
Jumping off what you're saying, my parting words of wisdom are going to be: oversaturation is a myth. Anybody who tells you that there's too many tabletop role-playing games out there is nuts. That's like saying there's too many movies. Why bother making a movie? Nobody would say that. Why are people saying that about tabletop role-playing games? If you are interested and excited about this cool thing, someone else is going to be interested and excited about this cool thing. There's no such thing as oversaturation. There's no such thing as too much competition in the market. A cool thing is still a cool thing. It's not going to get buried. That's my 2 cents. All right, I'd like to thank my guests for joining me today. I've Alan from Gallon Night Games, Dan from Almost Bedtime Theater, and Steph from ttrpgkids.com. Today we discussed you've funded your game, now what? Tune in also to the first part of the series, How to Crowdfund Your TTRPG Without Fear. I'm James Kerr, and on behalf of crowdfunder.com, thank you for listening. This panel is brought to you by Crowdfunder. Crowdfunder is the creator-friendly crowdfunding platform. The platform is free to use, listens to its creators, invests in their success, and cares about social good and impact. Crowdfunder's Tabletop Nonstop 2024, a special spotlight on TTRPG projects, starts in February. To learn more about Crowdfunder, please visit www.crowdfunder.com.